Hello. Today's topic is the production possibilities curve. Now, much like the name suggests, this is the production that is possible for an economy. We abbreviate this as PPC. PPC. Sometimes it's also referred to as Production Possibilities Frontier, and then it's abbreviated PPF, but it is the same thing. Okay, now we have the assumptions of the PPF. These are the things that we assume in order to make this presentation of this graph accurate for our economy. The assumptions of the PPC are that the amount of resources is fixed. And this makes sense. For any given point in time, resources are fixed. Now remember, our resources, recall, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Now entrepreneurship, realize, is really just specialized labor, but we now list them separately because, for example, we can easily learn to do a job, but can we necessarily learn to be, say, Sam Walton or Bill Gates? Okay, so this entrepreneurship is now listed separately instead of just being included with labor. The next one is that technology is constant. Now, technology changes over time, but at any given point, it's, say, a snapshot. Think about taking a picture. Whatever's captured in that picture, the technology is constant, the resources are constant or fixed. And then our third assumption is that resources are fully and efficiently employed. Fully and efficiently employed. That just means that we're using what we got, our land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, as well as possible. Okay, there aren't people sitting around. We are fully employed. We are fully using our factories. Factories aren't sitting idle. Now, there is also this idea that the resources can be allocated as needed in production. So whenever we say resources are fixed and resources are used fully and efficiently, that we're able to interchange these resources between the items being produced. Okay, so those are our assumptions. Resources are fixed, technology is constant, and resources are fully and efficiently utilized. Now we're going to draw our PPC. Okay, and it's a two-dimensional graph, and we're going to assume just some good 1 and good 2. Now, this is a simplified economy. Okay, this is only allowing for 2 goods to be produced. Now, if we used all of our resources to produce good 2, let's say we could produce here at point A. At point A, we're producing 0 of good 1 and a lot of good 2. Similarly, we could take all of our resources and all of our technology and we could produce there at point B. We could also produce somewhere in the middle. We could call it point C, and we could imagine connecting our dots. This graph shows all of the production that is possible. An economy could produce anywhere, any point along here. Now, if we put some names of goods, so for example, let's say that good 1 is guns and good 2 is food. Okay. Well, let's say that we choose to produce at point A. Well, at point A, we have a lot of food. Okay, so we're fat, we're happy, but we have no guns. And so realize another country could come in, invade us, and take us over. So we're fat and happy on the couch, but someone comes and takes over our country or our government. Okay, so you could see where point A isn't the best. Then the other side is we could choose point B. hey, we have lots and lots of guns. Nobody's going to come and cause us any trouble. Oh, but, we're starving to death. So that's no good. So you can start to see why somewhere in the middle, such as point C or a point D or point E, are good choices. Something in the middle where a little of both are being produced. Now, in this graph, we've graphed it as a straight line, which means there's a one-to-one trade-off between the goods, or there are constant costs, opportunity cost. Now, assuming this has a slope of a -1, for example, if we start here at A and go to D, we decrease our food, let's say by 1 unit. Let's say we were at 5, whatever 5 is, down to 4. And if we come down here, we go from 0, let's say, to 1. Okay, so that's what we mean by that one-to-one trade-off. As we go from D to C, here's 3, here's 2. So we give up 1 of the food and we gain 1 of the guns. That's what we mean by that one-to-one trade-off. Now this slope here is a slope of a -1. Now realize it could be a different slope and it could still be constant but not be 1-to-1. It could be 1-to-2, 1-to-3, etc., depending upon the actual slope. But if it's a straight line, that is saying that the trade-off is constant between the two goods. Well, in practicality, the trade-off isn't going to be constant. Okay, so let's redraw this graph. And we're going to draw it bowed out. Okay? And so the same thing, let's call this guns. Let's call this food. Okay? And let's still do one food, for example. Okay, so we're going to kind of just make up some numbers. If you don't like my numbers, well, think of it as in trillions or billions or something. But we're going to try to keep it simple. Okay, so here we start out. Okay, so if we're wanting to gain one food, okay, and let's go ahead and mark it for 1 and 1, okay? So, well, the way I've drawn this, let's change this. Let's change this number and this number. Okay, so we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? Now, as we go from 4 food down to 3 food, we want to gain some guns. Okay, and then let's do it down here. Okay, and I'll talk you through this in just a moment. Let me get it drawn out. Okay, now what we have here is increasing cost. Okay, and what we want to do is, for example, compare these 2 points. Now you'll notice, let's label this A, B, and C. As we go from A to B to C, as we go to A to B, we gain one food. Okay? Now, how much in guns do we have to give up? Well, if we put some numbers here, okay, this is going to be kind of messy, but let's just say this was, let's just label it the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So, if this is 4, and this is 3, so this is probably 3.5 right here. Okay, so we give up about 0.25 as we go from A to B. As we move from B to C, we gain one food. Okay, we go from 1 to 2, but we have to give up how many guns? Well, it's from here to here. So that's 0.5. Okay, so you notice at 0.25 as opposed to 0.5. And so we call this increasing cost. As we want more food, we're having to give up greater and greater amounts of guns to get it. Because you'll notice as we go from 3 to 4, as we move, let's go ahead and label this D and E. As we move from D to E, we gain, again, just one food, but we have to give up, let's see, looks like we're having to give up 1, 2, 2.5, which is much more than before. Okay, so that's what we mean by increasing cost, or we could call it increasing opportunity cost. Okay, and we've talked about opportunity cost. As we move from A to B, our opportunity cost of that one food, maybe it's 1 ton of food, is 0.25 guns. As we go from B to C, we get one food more. Our opportunity cost of that one extra of food is a half a gun. Finally, as we go from D to E, again, we're gaining one food, but we're having to give up 2.5 guns. That is our increasing cost. Now, the PPC is typically bowed out in the real world because we are faced with increasing cost. And the rationale for this is you can start to imagine resources that are used for guns. As we try to swap them over for food, you could think of it as increasing cost. You can think about labor. Okay, so you have a gunsmith, someone who's an expert at gun making. Okay, and you start to convert those people over to food production. Well, in the beginning, there may be some people who enjoy food production. They were making guns, but maybe they were just as good or interested in food. But as you keep going and going, you're going to come up with people that are even less qualified in food production than the others. Okay? And so that is our increasing cost. And so that is why it's bowed out. Now, let's go ahead and draw our PPC. And we're going to draw it bowed out, just like before. We can talk about good 1 and good 2, just as before. Points on our PPC, any point on the PPC, and we can draw an infinite number of them. To be on your PPC, means that you are using all resources and technology fully and efficiently. Okay, so to be on your PPC means that you are using all your resources and technology fully and efficiently. So any of these points are equally good. Now you could argue that some are more practical than others. So for example, points A and G probably are not practical, where you're producing all of one good and nothing of the other. But they're all possible, they're all equally good in terms of the use of your resources and technology. That is what we mean by being on your PPC. Now let's talk about points off your PPC. Okay, so we draw our PPC. We can talk about points like A. Now realize at point A, you're not producing anything, and so you are not using all your resources or your technology fully and efficiently. Not using. Actually, at point A, you're not using any of them, okay, because zero production is going on. But you could also talk about a point B. Points A and B are possible. Okay, your country or your economy could decide to do that, but it's not a good idea. These are possible, but not efficient. You could also say at points A and B, resources and or technology is not being, I guess you should say are not being fully utilized. Remember, that was one of our assumptions. If you're on your PPF, that means resources are fully and efficiently employed. So points A and B, they're feasible, they're possible, but they're not efficient. They're not good choices, but they're choices that are available to the economy. Now let's draw our PPF again. Here's our PPF, and we could have a point such as point X. Okay, now remember, whenever we first introduced the concept of economics, one of the things that we talked about was economic goals, and we talked about what we would like. And we would like output to always go up. Now realize at point X, more stuff is being produced. However, as of right now, point X is not possible. Or you could say not feasible. There are not enough resources and or technology to get to point F. So for example, we could be at point A. Now realize at point A, this amount of good 1's being produced, this amount of good 2. Realize at point X, it's saying, oh, well, let's produce the same amount of good 2 as we are at point A, but we want even more of good 1. Well, realize at point A, the one that's on the PPC, is already using all the resources possible. They are using them fully and efficiently, and technology is fully being utilized. So there is nothing available to produce any more of anything. And in this case, we're trying to produce more of good 1. But it's not possible. It is not feasible. Let's draw the graph again. Now we can show economic growth. So for example, we could be at point A today, and what we would like is to be at point X in the future, maybe next year. Next year we would like to get to point X. And how can we get there? Well, we can have economic growth. Okay, so this is graphing economic growth, which is one of the things we want to have happen. So economic growth is shown by your PPC shifting out to the right. We want economic growth, and in a typical year in the United States, we would expect about 3% a year, 3 to say 4%. We would expect economic growth of that much. Now, how do you get economic growth? Well, you have to increase your resources. Remember, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Now, how can you increase those resources? Well, you can acquire more land. We could take over some other countries, for example, get more land. We could recover more land, make it more usable. We could work on capital. That would be through investment. So if businesses built more factories today as an investment, then we would have more capital tomorrow, because capital is stuff like machinery, buildings, equipment. We could also have labor. We could increase our labor. So for example, if our population went up, if the number of 18-year-old and up population goes up, then we can talk about labor increasing. We could also talk about labor being of higher quality. You always hear, oh, you need to go to school, you need to go to college, you need to get more training. We need a better prepared workforce. Well, we could take the same number of people we have, but make them a higher quality labor force. And so that would be one way to make economic growth happen. Now, the other way is through technology, making things always better. Okay, we could also have an increase in technology. But realize, in order to get economic growth, something has to change. Because at point A, we were doing as good as we possibly could. We were using all our resources that we had and all our technology that we had as well as possible. And so in order to get growth, then you're going to have to add to it, make it better. Okay? So that is how you get economic growth. Okay, we're going to draw the graph one more time, just as a point of example. We're going to kind of review what we just did. Okay, so here's your PPF. Okay, points like A, B, C, even one really close, such as D. Okay, so A, B, C, D. Possible, they're possible or feasible, if you like that word better, feasible, but not efficient. Okay, points E, F, G, H, I. Okay, E, F, G, H, and I are feasible and efficient. Okay, so that's where we want to be. As of today, that's as best as we can do. Any point on that PPC. Then we can also talk about a point like X or Z. X and Z, not feasible. They're not even a choice today. Not feasible today. Maybe tomorrow. If there's an increase in resources or an increase in technology. That is how we get economic growth. Okay, so that's how we use this PPC. Now realize we have to make choices. Where do we want to be on our PPC? What type of products does our economy want to have produced? Okay, but the PPC shows the possibilities that our producers or that our economy can choose. Now realize with the PPC here, we're assuming a closed economy. So we're also assuming here that whatever is produced in the United States by this graph is consumed by the United States. So as of right now with this PPC, we're not allowing for international trade. Now later on we will. Okay, but if there's no international trade, this production possibilities curve is also your consumption possibilities curve. What is produced in the country is what you as a consumer have to choose from. So realize that helps to determine what is produced by what consumers want to have.